loves! So, I have tonight's Night of Reflection send-off. So, tonight, I am going to pull from 1 Peter, chapter 4. I love 1 Peter, it's a great book. Alright, so, as we're all heading back to campus and getting ready to start our kingdom visions and outreaches and living on floors with non-Christians and just being back in a predominantly non-Christian environment, I wanted to encourage y'all on the topic of suffering for being a Christian. A lot of y'all know about, like, last week, the religious pluralism training and all that drama and stuff, and I remember feeling really, really alone, and I mean, y'all know I texted you, and it was just really an eye-opener, though, because most of us are going to experience that in a lot of our universities, and I just wanted to encourage everyone, in case they do, and especially for those that are still living in dorms or residence halls, that they don't get too downtrodden about living in a non-Christian environment. It's pretty overwhelming after a project and everything. And for those of you that aren't living in dorms, just for everyone, our kingdom outreaches and everything. So anyways, I'm going to start. It's going to be verses 12 through 19, but I highly encourage you to read verses 1 through 12 as well. I just didn't want to make this too lengthy. Okay, so starting with 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12. Dear friends, do not be surprised at the painful trial you are suffering, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice that you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted because of the name of Christ, you are blessed, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. If you suffer, it should not be as a murderer or a thief or any other kind of criminal, or even as a meddler. However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. For it is time for judgment to begin with the family of God. And if it begins with us, what will the outcome be for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And if it is hard for the righteous to be saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? So then, those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful Creator and continue to do good. So I heard a sermon on this last Sunday, not today, but last Sunday, and it was a really great sermon, especially just right after my suffering and stuff or whatever. And so some of the points that I really took from the sermon, I'm going to share with y'all. In this passage, there are 4 proper responses to suffering that Peter describes. And these are the only 4 responses that really Christ calls us to respond in. First, in verse 12, it says, Dear friends, do not be surprised at the painful trial you are suffering, as though something strange were happening to you. So, in the midst of suffering, we should not be alarmed. This is oftentimes what it's like being a Christian. It shouldn't be a surprise when you're suffering. Being a Christian isn't easy. We all know that. Second proper response, verse 13. But rejoice that you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. So in the midst of suffering, we should rejoice. Rejoicing in giving him praise in everything that we do, choosing to see the positive and not the negative, just rejoicing so that others can see God's glory. Third proper response. In the midst of suffering, we must resist shame or the urge to pull back. In verse 16, it says, However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. I know for me, a lot of times in the midst of suffering, I like to pull back and draw away from whatever is bringing me that suffering, when Christ calls us to not be ashamed, to not want to pull back from that, but to stand and face it with the strength that he's instilled upon us. And so verse 16 reminds us again, that we bear the name of Christ and that we have all power that he's given us to stand against the devil, and that it's through Christ's strength that we're able to fight against the evils of this world. And then the fourth proper response: in the midst of suffering, we should continue on in the life that brought us to this place. So whatever brought us to this place of suffering is part of God's plan. We should continue on in it and continue to follow his plan. I think it's important to remember that insults and suffering clarify who we are. It's a mark of authenticity. If you aren't suffering, then what kind of Christian are you? Are you putting your neck on the line? Are you proclaiming Christ's name, or are you proclaiming your name? And lastly, we can respond in an unbelievable way to suffering because of the relative insignificance of the pain. A lot of times we cannot coherently measure, accurately measure the amount of pain that we're going through in the midst of suffering, because it seems a lot worse than it really is. But as a Christian, in reality, it's extremely insignificant. The worst imaginable suffering for the name of Christ cannot be compared to the suffering that will be experienced by those who reject Christ. Verse 17 really backs that up, talking about judgment. And I think it's important to remember that the judgment day is coming, and the wrath of God will fall upon the ungodly and the sinners and the non-believers. And we just need to remember that what we're suffering right now is not as significant as what they will suffer. And if anything, that should push us to reach out to more people. So yeah, that's basically the message. And I have a song I was going to play, but I'm going to see how long this video is, and then I might have to upload another video. I don't know. Okay.